The winter of 1878 was the coldest Wyoming had seen in 50 years, turning Penny Walker's world into a nightmare of ice and betrayal as the three men who'd kidnapped her laughed while shoving her toward the frozen pond. Their voices carried through the bitter air like the howl of wolves, promising that her father would pay handsomely to have his precious daughter returned if the frigid water didn't claim her first. "Your pa's gonna learn what happens when he refuses to sell to the right people," the tallest one snarled, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The other two men flanked her, their grips bruising through her woolen coat as they dragged her across the snow-covered ground toward the glistening frozen surface. Penny fought with every ounce of strength her 22-year-old body possessed. "My father will hunt you down like the vermin you are," she spat, her honey-brown hair whipping across her face as she struggled. The leader of the group just laughed. "He can try." With a cruel smile, he pulled a knife from his belt and began cutting at the ice, his companions holding Penny firmly as she kicked and screamed. When the hole was large enough, they lifted her struggling form. "Sweet dreams, Miss Walker," the leader taunted before they swung her once, twice, and on the third swing launched her toward the opening in the ice. The shock of the freezing water stole her breath instantly. Penny's heavy skirts dragged her down as the icy water enveloped her body like 1,000 needles piercing her skin. She clawed desperately at the jagged edges of the ice, but her fingers were already going numb, slipping on the slick surface as the men's laughter faded into the distance. "Help!" she screamed, but her voice was weak, the frigid water rapidly sapping her strength. The cold was paralyzing, stealing her ability to think as her limbs grew leaden. She managed to keep her head above water, gasping for air, but each passing second made it harder to hold on. Just as her vision began to darken around the edges, Penny heard the thunder of hoofbeats approaching. Through water-blurred eyes, she saw a figure dismount from a horse and rush toward the pond. "Hold on!" a deep voice called out as a tall man dropped to his stomach at the edge of the ice, carefully distributing his weight as he inched toward her. Penny tried to speak, but her teeth were chattering too violently. She felt her grip weakening, her body starting to slip beneath the surface when a strong hand grabbed her wrist. "I've got you," the man grunted, pulling her toward solid ice with careful, steady movements. With a strength born of desperation, he dragged her from the freezing water and scooped her into his arms. "You're safe now," he said, his voice low and steady as he carried her to his horse. His face was partially obscured by the brim of his hat, but she caught a glimpse of concerned blue eyes before unconsciousness claimed her. When Penny next opened her eyes, she was wrapped in warm blankets near a crackling fire. The rough-hewn walls of a cabin surrounded her, and the scent of coffee and wood smoke filled her nostrils. She tried to sit up, but her body protested with a deep ache that made her groan. "Easy there," came the same deep voice from the pond. A man moved into her field of vision, kneeling beside the bed. "You've been through quite an ordeal." In the warm light of the fire, Penny could see her rescuer clearly. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 26 or 27, with a strong jaw dusted with stubble and those striking blue eyes she remembered from her rescue. His brown hair was slightly too long, curling at the edges where it met his collar. "Who are you?" she managed, her voice hoarse. "Jake Zimmerman," he replied, offering her a cup of steaming liquid. "Ranch hand at the Double Cross, at least until yesterday." He helped her sit up enough to sip the hot tea. "Mind telling me why 3 men were trying to drown you in Coldwater Pond?" Penny took a careful sip, the warmth spreading through her chest. "My name is Penny Walker. My father owns the Walker Ranch." She paused, noting how Jake's expression changed slightly at the mention of her name. "Those men work for Victor Holcomb. He's been trying to buy our land for months, but my father refuses to sell." Jake nodded slowly. "Holcomb's been buying up half the county. Folks say he's in with the railroad. He is, Penny confirmed. And now he's resorted to kidnapping. A shiver ran through her that had nothing to do with her cold, wet clothes. How did you find me? Jake moved to stoke the fire. I was riding the boundary line, heading north after quitting the double cross. Heard screaming. He turned back to her, his expression grim. Those men, did you recognize any of them? The leader was Eli Tanner. He's Holcomb's foreman. Penny clutched the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The others I've seen around town, but don't know their names. Jake nodded, his jaw tightening. Tanner's got a reputation. Not a good one. He stood and moved to a trunk in the corner, pulling out a bundle of clothing. These belong to my sister. She's about your size. Your clothes are soaked through. You should change before you catch your death. Penny hesitated, but her practical nature won out over propriety. Her dress was still dripping onto the wooden floor. Thank you for everything. Jake had the decency to step outside while she changed, returning only after she called for him. The simple calico dress was a bit short at the ankles but otherwise fit well enough. We need to get you back to your father, Jake said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. But not tonight. It's 10 miles to the Walker Ranch and there's a storm coming. We'll head out at first light. Penny wanted to argue, knowing her father would be sick with worry, but she could hear the wind picking up outside, howling around the corners of the small cabin. Where exactly are we? My place, Jake said. Or what's left of it. My pa built this cabin years ago. I come here sometimes when I need to think. He gestured to the sparse furnishings: a table, 2 chairs, the bed she occupied, and little else. It's not much, but it's shelter. Why did you quit the double cross? Penny asked, watching as he moved around the cabin with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to taking care of himself. Jake paused, considering his words. Foreman asked me to do something I wasn't willing to do. His eyes met hers. Holcomb's been pressuring all the ranches in the area. The double cross sold last week. Understanding dawned on Penny. And they wanted you to help pressure my father next. Jake nodded. I don't intimidate innocent folks, especially not good men like Thomas Walker. He sat in the chair across from her. Your father gave me my first job when I was 17. I owe him respect at the very least. The revelation surprised Penny. You worked for my father? I don't remember you. A small smile touched Jake's lips. It was just for a summer about 9 years back. You were probably still in school back east. Boston, Penny confirmed. I only returned to Wyoming last year after Mother died. The memory brought a pang of sadness. Father needed help running things. They talked as the storm grew outside, the wind rattling the shutters as snow piled against the cabin walls. Jake told her about growing up in Wyoming, the son of a miner who died in a cave-in when Jake was 15. He'd made his way as a ranch hand ever since, saving what he could in hopes of having his own land someday. Penny shared stories of her mother, a Boston socialite who never quite adjusted to frontier life, but loved Thomas Walker enough to try. She spoke of her education and her dreams of establishing a proper school in their small town. As night deepened, Jake insisted on sleeping on the floor near the fire, giving Penny the bed. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully as her mind replayed the terrifying moments in the icy water. In the dark hours before dawn, she woke with a strangled cry, her body jerking as if she were falling through ice again. Jake was beside her in an instant. You're safe, he said, his voice cutting through her panic. You're safe, Penny. Without thinking, she reached for his hand, gripping it like a lifeline. I keep feeling the cold closing over me. Jake sat on the edge of the bed, his presence solid and reassuring. I know something about nightmares, he said quietly. After my pa died, I couldn't close my eyes without seeing the mine collapse. How did you make it stop? She asked. Time helps, he said. And knowing you're not alone. Penny looked up at him, really seeing him in the dim firelight. There was a gentleness to his strength that she hadn't expected, a thoughtfulness behind his words. Thank you for saving my life, she whispered. Anyone would have done the same, he replied. Penny shook her head. No, not anyone. She held his gaze. You risked your life crawling out onto that ice. Something shifted in Jake's expression. Get some rest, Miss Walker. We've got a long ride tomorrow. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving a pristine blanket of snow across the landscape. Jake had coffee brewing before Penny awoke, and had even managed to make a passable breakfast from his limited supplies. Your horse? Penny asked as they prepared to leave. She's strong enough to carry us both, Jake replied, helping her into her coat, now mostly dry after hanging near the fire all night. It'll be slow going in the snow, but we should reach your ranch by midday. The journey was indeed slow, with Jake leading his mare carefully through the snow-covered terrain. Penny sat behind him, her arms wrapped around his waist for balance. The closeness should have been uncomfortable given their short acquaintance, but instead, Penny found herself drawing strength from his solid presence. As they rode, Jake told her more about Holcomb's operations. He's been methodical, first buying out the smaller homesteaders, then pressuring the established ranches. Rumor has it he's promised the railroad a clear path through the valley, and our ranch sits right in the middle of that path, Penny finished. Father suspected as much, but he would never sell. This land has been in our family for 2 generations. Men like Holcomb don't respect tradition or family ties, Jake said. They only understand money and power. And violence, Penny added, involuntarily tightening her hold on him as she remembered the icy water. Jake covered her hand with his own for a brief moment. We'll make sure your father knows what happened. Holcomb won't get away with this. As they crested a hill, the Walker Ranch came into view in the valley below. Even at a distance, Penny could see unusual activity, too many horses in the yard, men moving about with purpose. Something's wrong, Jake said, urging his horse forward with more speed. As they drew closer, Penny recognized several of the horses as belonging to neighboring ranchers. Then she saw her father standing on the porch, deep in conversation with Sheriff Davis. Father, she called out as they approached. Thomas Walker spun around, his weathered face lighting up with relief. Penny! He rushed down the steps as Jake helped her dismount. My God! We've been searching everywhere. Penny fell into her father's embrace, tears springing to her eyes. Father, it was Holcomb's men. They took me. Her voice broke as the trauma of the previous day washed over her anew. Miss Walker was thrown into Coldwater Pond, sir, Jake explained, standing respectfully to the side. I happened to be riding by and pulled her out. Sheriff Davis stepped forward, his expression grim. You're saying Victor Holcomb's men tried to drown Thomas Walker's daughter? Not just tried, Penny said, gathering her composure. They succeeded in throwing me in. If Mr. Zimmerman hadn't come along when he did, I'd be dead. The sheriff's face hardened. Who exactly are we talking about here? Eli Tanner was leading them, Penny said firmly. There were 2 others with him. Thomas Walker's face had gone pale with rage. I'll kill him myself, he muttered. Now, Thomas, Sheriff Davis cautioned. We'll handle this legally. This is exactly the evidence we needed against Holcomb. He turned to Jake. You willing to testify to what you saw, son? Jake nodded solemnly. Yes, sir. What followed was a flurry of activity. The sheriff gathered a posse to ride to Holcomb's ranch and arrest Tanner and his accomplices. Thomas Walker insisted Jake stay as an honored guest, overwhelmed with gratitude for saving his only child. That evening, After giving her statement to the sheriff and changing into her own clothes, Penny found Jake on the front porch, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. "The sheriff thinks they'll have Tanner and the others in custody by morning," she said, joining him at the railing. Jake nodded. "Your father offered me a job." Penny smiled. "I'm not surprised. He values loyalty above all else." She studied his profile in the fading light. "Will you accept?" "I'm considering it," he replied. "Your father runs a good operation. Fair wages, decent treatment. And you'd have a friend in the owner's daughter," Penny added, surprising herself with her boldness. Jake turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Is that what we are, Miss Walker? Friends?" "After what we've been through, I think you can call me Penny," she said. "And yes, I'd like to think we're friends, at the very least." "At the very least," he repeated, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. Over the next few weeks, Jake proved himself invaluable to the Walker Ranch. He worked harder than any two men, showed natural leadership with the other hands, and brought innovative ideas that impressed even Thomas Walker, who wasn't easily impressed. Penny found herself looking for excuses to be near him, bringing lunch to the men working the north pasture, asking his opinion on a new strain of wheat they were considering for the east field, even requesting riding lessons, though she'd been in the saddle since childhood. For his part, Jake maintained a respectful distance, always addressing her as Miss Walker in front of others. But his eyes told a different story when they happened to be alone. There was a warmth there, a connection that grew stronger with each passing day. The trial of Eli Tanner and his accomplices brought unwelcome attention back to the events at Coldwater Pond. Penny was required to testify, reliving the terrifying experience before a packed courtroom. When she faltered, describing the moment she was thrown into the icy water, she found Jake's steady gaze across the room, drawing strength from his presence just as she had that night in the cabin. Victor Holcomb himself was implicated in the conspiracy, his carefully constructed empire of intimidation crumbling as other ranchers came forward with their own stories of threats and violence. The railroad withdrew their support, unwilling to be associated with such scandal. As winter gave way to spring, life at the Walker Ranch settled into a pleasant rhythm. Thomas Walker, seeing the way the wind was blowing between his daughter and his new foreman, took Jake aside one evening. "Walk with me, son," he said, leading Jake away from the house. "I see how you look at my daughter." Jake straightened, preparing for a rebuke. "Sir, I've maintained nothing but proper." Thomas waved him off. "I know you have. You're an honorable man, Jake. That's partly why I'm giving you this." He handed Jake an envelope. Inside was a deed to a parcel of land 100 acres on the eastern edge of Walker property, including the creek that ran through it. "Sir, I can't accept this," Jake said, stunned. "You're not. It's an investment," Thomas replied. "You build it up, run your own herd alongside ours. One day, when I'm gone, Penny will need a strong partner to help her run this place." He fixed Jake with a knowing look. "I'm not getting any younger, and I'd like to see my daughter settled with a good man before I go." Jake was speechless, the deed heavy in his hands. "Just something to consider," Thomas said, clapping him on the shoulder before walking back to the house. The next morning, Jake rode out early to survey the land that could be his. It was good property, water access, sheltered grazing, even a small stand of timber. With hard work, it could support a decent herd within a few years. He was so lost in thought that he didn't hear the approaching rider until she was nearly upon him. "Planning where to build your empire?" Penny asked, bringing her mare alongside his gelding. Jake smiled. "Your father is a generous man." "He's a practical man," Penny corrected. "He recognizes value when he sees it." She looked out over the land. "It's beautiful here." "It is," Jake agreed, watching her rather than the landscape. Penny turned to find him studying her, a warmth spreading through her at his gaze. "You know, I never properly thanked you for saving my life." "You've thanked me plenty," Jake said. "Not properly," Penny insisted. She guided her horse closer to his. "I've been thinking about that night in your cabin. How easy it was to talk to you, even after everything that had happened." Jake's expression softened. "I've thought about that night too." "And what have you thought?" Penny asked, her heart quickening. "That I've never met anyone like you," Jake said simply. "Brave, determined, kind." Penny smiled. "You forgot stubborn." "I was getting to that," he replied with a grin. Their horses had drawn so close that their legs were nearly touching. Jake reached across the small space between them, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Penny," he said, his voice low, "I know I'm not the kind of man your mother might have wanted for you. I don't have much to offer except hard work and a true heart," she finished for him. "That's worth more than all the society connections in Boston." She leaned closer. "I almost died that day, Jake. It makes a person think about what really matters in life." "And what matters to you?" he asked, his blue eyes intent on hers. "This," she whispered, closing the distance between them for a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened with months of unspoken feelings. When they finally broke apart, Jake looked somewhat dazed. "I've been wanting to do that since the moment you opened your eyes in my cabin." Penny laughed. "And I've been wanting you to do that since the day you testified against Tanner without a hint of fear in your eyes." Jake took her hand in his. "I should speak to your father." "He already knows," Penny said with a smile. "Why do you think he gave you this land? He's been playing matchmaker all along." The spring and summer passed in a whirlwind of work and planning. Jake built a small but sturdy house on his new property, with Penny offering suggestions on everything from the placement of windows to the size of the kitchen. Thomas Walker watched with satisfaction as the young couple grew closer, their shared experience having forged a bond that only strengthened with time. By fall, it surprised no one when Jake formally asked for Penny's hand in marriage. Their wedding was a community affair, with ranchers from miles around gathering to celebrate. Even Sheriff Davis attended, bringing news that Victor Holcomb had been sentenced to 10 years in the territorial prison for his crimes. As Jake and Penny shared their first dance as husband and wife, he pulled her close and whispered, "You know, I never expected to find love by a frozen pond in the dead of winter." Penny smiled up at him. "And I never expected that being thrown into icy water would lead me to the warmest heart I've ever known." Later that night, as they stood on the porch of their new home under a canopy of stars, Jake wrapped his arms around Penny from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Remember what I said when I pulled you from that pond?" he asked. Penny leaned back against him, savoring his warmth. "You said, 'You're safe now.'" Jake turned her in his arms to face him. "I meant it then, and I mean it now. As long as I'm breathing, you'll always be safe, Penny Zimmerman." She reached up to touch his face, the face of the man who had not only saved her life but had given it new meaning. "I know," she whispered, "and so will you." As winter approached again, bringing with it memories of that fateful day at Coldwater Pond, Penny and Jake made a point of riding out to the spot where they had first met. The pond was not yet frozen, its surface rippling gently in the November breeze. "It looks so peaceful now," Penny said, standing at the edge where Jake had risked his life to save hers. "Nature has a way of hiding its dangers," Jake replied, his arms secure around her waist. Penny turned to him with a smile. "I have something to tell you." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Oh." "By next winter, there will be 3 of us to keep warm," she said, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. Jake's face transformed with wonder and joy. "A baby? Are you certain?" Penny nodded, laughing as he swept her into his arms. spinning her around carefully before setting her back on her feet. "That pond tried to take you from this world," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. "Instead, it gave me the greatest gift I could ever receive, you, and now our child." As they rode home together, planning for their future and the new life that would join them, Penny reflected on how a moment of terror had led to a lifetime of love. The frozen pond that had nearly claimed her life had instead set her on a path to happiness she could never have imagined. And as Jake had promised that fateful day, she was safe now not just from the dangers of ice and cold, but within the warmth of a love that had been forged in adversity and would endure through all the seasons of their lives together.